Videos that come out are people running from drones, shooting at them helplessly, and eventually usually getting blown up. Yes, but the drones now have levels of autonomy that they didn't have even 2 years ago, where they are deciding. The drone is deciding, not a person. And so, like, increasingly, war will be fought with humans versus machines. As gives you an idea of the volume of them, where there's 25,000 from Russia used every month alone. And I want the video that hits for the day to be one where, you know, some Russian is flying their drone, or it's an autonomous Lancet drone or something like that at a Ukrainian element, one of our first customers, and they blast out of the sky and they keep on going. And that's what leaks from their helmet cam. We'll be very excited for that day.
Good afternoon. This is the JP Dinnell podcast, episode 17. I am JP Dinnell, and as always, I have Lucas with me. What's up, man?
What's going on, dude? I'm really excited to have Mike Mitchell out of here. No, and Mike's episodes were great, but I'm excited about today's guest, dude. Yeah. This is going to be awesome.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. So I'm obviously very excited for the guests that we have here with us today. All the lessons that we're going to get to learn from my buddy Joel Anderson. I first met Joel in San Diego at FTX 002, and then he came back to FTX 003, which those are the field training exercises that we run at Echelon Front. It allows individuals to come do the training if they don't have a big company to come bring, or they want to check it out before they make the investment. So he went to the first one in San Diego, and I remember meeting him there, and just his intentionality behind the training and how serious he took. You could tell he's an athlete. Come to find out, he wrestled. So I was like, cool, that definitely makes sense. And then he came to St. Louis for FTX 003 and brought one of his coworkers, and it was awesome to see the progress and just, you know, again, how serious he was taking everything. And just watching him lead and work through the scenarios, which I love that of what I get to do is watch these leaders solve problems, to think. And it quickly was apparent to me that Joel is very intelligent and, you know, is able to process information and, you know, runs through the OODA loop much faster than most people. But also a very humble leader, and is also human and has his flaws, like we all do, and was wanting to work on his shortcomings and also wanting to work on his strengths, and to, you know, to grow both of those, which is awesome. And we ended up doing an FTX, a 2-day FTX with Joel and his company. He brought us out there, and we put 50 of their leaders through the training, 25 each day. And after the first day, you know, he took us out to this nice dinner, and it was awesome just to get in and sit and talk and listen and be able to learn from Joel and us enjoy that time together. And the next day, great day of training. And it was awesome because actually at this time he was finishing up, I believe, 75 hard. And he was super, like, we're talking the back stretch, like last probably 10-ish days of 75 hard, and was super dialed in with the diet and the workouts and consuming the water and doing all those things. And we're at a nice restaurant where it's easy to eat within your macros of what your diet is, your strict diet for 75 hard. But man, there was some temptations there. And he was true to the core of who he is, which is being disciplined, being dialed in, and once you make a commitment, he follows through with that commitment. And at the FTX, he's having a conversation with one of my buddies, Jesse Rember. I've talked about him on Jocko's podcast before. He helps us out at Echelon Front as a role player for the FTXs, and he is a former Green Beret. He's a full-time Denver SWAT guy, and he's just an absolute stud. And we were talking shooting, tactics, combatives types of things, and Joel and Jesse dove deeper into this conversation, and it sparked an interest, and then it sparked a thought, and Joel realized, hey, there is a problem here. How can I solve this problem? What could I do to solve this problem? What skill sets do I have that could help solve this problem? And, you know, he asked a few more questions, and, you know, was kind of talking through some stuff, and it's awesome that we get to pull the thread with Joel today. He's obviously going to share some stories from wrestling and growing up and his marriage and business, and I'm really excited to hear about this current venture and business. There's so many things to learn from it, and you know, I'm honored to call Joel a friend, and I'm honored for the times that we spent on the phone and just talking through stuff, and you know what we're going to be able to do together in the future moving forward is just, I'm really proud of you, Joel. I'm honored to have you on the podcast, and I'm glad it worked out with our schedules. And man, just looking forward to learning from you again. What's going on, man? How's your travel out?
Oh, travel's not bad. Thank you for those kind words. I appreciate that.
They're all true, my man. And I didn't put enough of them out there for what I know so far. But so you flew in from the East Coast, and
Yes,
you came out here to do some testing with this technology that you created. But before we dive into that, tell us a little bit about yourself. Like, where'd you grow up? What'd you do? Like, how was your childhood? What were sports like? What was your journey that brought you to becoming a young man? And then we can go from there.
That's a loaded question. I mean, I grew up in a family that's very entrepreneurial. That was always the case from grandparents and parents down in Florida, where wrestling, although that was one of my sports, was not a very well-regarded sport down there as it is in the Northeast and certainly down in Texas. But yeah, grew up boating, beaching, that kind of fun stuff, scuba diving, had a keen interest in the Navy. Grandfather was Navy, uncle was a beret with the Army. And wanted to go down that path. I had, I've heard your stories too on like kind of the inspiration in your childhood of like combat leadership. And I don't know if it was Charlie Sheen or The Rock or Navy SEALs, whichever movie it was. But,
all of the above.
shared a lot of those common interests and enlisted in the Navy to go do that. But then this was pre-Cyber Command, and I turns out that that's at least at the time, was a much more difficult skill for them to place. And there was a program, it's kind of like the Defense Ventures Fellows that they do today, if you're familiar with that at all, where they would place folks in the Navy into private contracts with basically primes like your Lockheed Martin, Raytheon. Yeah. I spent a number of years with a subsidiary of Honeywell called Cypress Electronics, doing a number of things from building encrypted radios to go in the Abrams tanks to building cybersecurity training platforms. But my background anyways as a kid was I spent most of my childhood both one with that dream and two cheating in video games, like building literal aimbots for like America's Army was a game.
Is this your dream day?
Only if he can teach me how to cheat is it my dream day.
Oh, he's about to.
Oh, perfect.
Sorry.
Yeah, well, I think like the irony of that is not lost on me. That what I'm building today is like a real life aimbot, but in my childhood I was building actual, like the canonical definition of aimbots for video games, from Counter-Strike to America.
Do you know what that means, an aimbot?
Shut up.
No, I'm being serious, because there are going to be people, because not everybody who listens to our podcast plays video games, right?
Like me.
Yeah. Yep. So, and aim. Can you explain what an aimbot is for?
It takes the skill
folk.
out of,
and for my wife who won't listen to this anyway.
Sure.
17 years.
Okay, that's right.
Yeah. So in video games that are of shooting in nature, first-person shooters like your classic Counter-Strike or Call of Duty, even if you don't play, everyone's heard of that.
Yes.
Game
Yep. I know.
An aimbot uses it circumvents the way that the game is meant to be played, and it cheats so that the aiming is instantaneous or automatic. So you never miss your shots, which kind of takes the fun out of it, but you also never lose. And there's something appealing about that, right? Like winning is all that matters in those kinds of circumstances. And there's something, it's inspiring about that. I wanted to provide that in real life too. I want to load the dice for those kinds of operations for our defenders and for our defenses. And lo and behold, like somehow I made it back to that of building aimbots. But my background was in cybersecurity. I've done a number of things from, I used to compete in the world's biggest hacking competitions out in Vegas called DEF CON CTF, and then eventually created and ran the contests. I have like what's called a black badge. The DEF CON, this is a small community in the grand scheme of things, though it's growing pretty rapidly, but that's kind of like a mark of fame. It's kind of like having a black badge to DEF CON is a little bit like having what do they call it in Hollywood? The stars on the ground, whatever that thing is.
Yeah.
And winners of our contest.
Walk of Fame.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And that's kind of where we're at for that. So I had a deep background. I knew a very small world of cybersecurity. Had my own incidents of like dubious involvement in certain activities, like learning about massive data collection and carding and things like that. Had my own run-ins with the FBI. I never broke the law, just to be clear on that.
Yeah.
Though they've been whatever. Well, that's a conversation for a different time.
Got it. I can't wait.
And so that was my childhood was spent that way. It was in sports. It was in just exploiting and trying to find ways to beat systems and win in systems. Whether that was in technicalities in wrestling or whether that was in video games with cheating by understanding the computer system. I graduated. As a matter of fact, I graduated high school almost 3 years early because they had vulnerable systems. Florida Virtual School came out. I probably should admit this on a public podcast, but I will anyways. It was a brand new program that allowed you to get high school credits. I was 15 years old at the time. I was a deep background in cybersecurity. I was one of like the preeminent people in the world at that time when it was still pretty small. And unfortunately, their system was very insecure. So I finished high school that summer, like just taking classes on it, and I didn't do much work at all.
Wow.
This is, before ChatGPT would make it easy to really do the work for you. I just gave myself the work and grades and credit. And yeah.
Can I interrupt real quick?
Sure.
So to your statement of like, I don't know if I should put this out this many years later. Here's the deal. Who cares? Yeah. You're clearly smarter than everybody else out there trying to implement.
We're allowed to.
I will.
Yeah, you don't.
And I will continue to double down on that. I'm saying in regards to all the people that created these systems and did all these things for the school systems, I'm not taking away from the school systems or teachers. Obviously, our teachers are valuable, but I think we've gotten away from how we should be teaching our kids and what the focus is. And you found a loophole because of your intellect, which clearly has helped you be successful. And when we say success on this podcast, we're talking about being able to love what you do. You love what you do. You provide for your family. You have a good family. You're contributing. You know what I mean? And so that's what we look at as success. And I've always looked at you as a successful person because I know you love what you do. And I think it's awesome that you did that.
Yeah.
I think it's awesome that you did that. I would be proud if any of my kids ever were able to figure that one out.
Yeah.
So you graduated high school 3 years early.
Yeah. We kind of ran out of things to do. I was out at University of Arizona at that age. Like, it's you're in a different state of life.
Yes, sir. I agree.
That's when I enlisted in the Navy, and then 2 years later was doing the program that I talked about in cybersecurity, and then spent many years going through that. Fast forward many years later, there's a lot of commonality in the things that I wound up doing, even though if you look on like a LinkedIn, it's a super disparate and random, crazy background. But there is like a connecting thread through it all. But was wound up in just enterprise software, was building databases with a company called MongoDB. I joined them to help them go public, ran their security and their internal IT and operations and go-to-market operations and a whole bunch of system stuff. And had that FTX that you're mentioning when it struck me as two things happening at the same time. I think you know some of the story, but I'll kind of repackage it for the benefit of the conversation.
Yes, let's go.
One, I passed the age in which, not even like special operations, the military was a closed chapter, for at least for what I wanted to do. And that hit me as hard. That was always something that I wanted to do differently versus the cybersecurity path that I was thrust into. And in hindsight, don't get me wrong, like that was the right, like it was very beneficial for me in my career, but it wasn't what I wanted in my heart. And I always felt a calling for different things. And I wanted to find a way to reconnect with that and find a way of impacting, like in combat leadership in the warfighter community, making an impact regardless of the physicality of it. Super ironic about that is like for Navy, for example, like BUDS, you can now, ensigns can be 42 years old. So when I started this, yes, recent change.
Ensigns can be 42 years old?
Correct. Yep. And go to BUDS.
There's a chance I can go back.
Bro, I'm thinking about signing up.
So do you have some system that can get me a college degree in 9 months? No, just kidding.
Yeah, you could do it. Adaptive education. Well, along the way anyways, I was working at a tech company called Newton, and we built adaptive education. So your point on like the education system, that's a huge passion of mine. I have 3 goals that I want to accomplish before I am gone from this world. One of them is related to what we're doing with ZeroMark and taking the skill out of the hard parts of any kind of military operation and making sure that American forces and our allies have ultimately like total supremacy. I want to load the dice for them. I don't want there to be a situation in any environment or context, especially for dismounted operations where we have any peer-to-peer engagement ever. And that's what we're trying to solve with ZeroMark. The second thing is I want to destroy the Carnegie unit, which is the college credit hour. I think it's the biggest scam that has existed. It's hurting economics. It's hurting culture. It's hurting America. And I'm happy to go down that path. And I don't mean like just school is bad. I mean the way that the systems have grown to pump kids through like a clip from like a Pink Floyd music video when the kids are falling in the meat grinder kind of thing. I think that needs to change because every single person is different. But that aside, and then the third thing is I'm going to put Forever 21 and Arby's out of business before I'm dead. Forever 21 already is done, so I've got one more to go.
Why Arby's?
I'm nervous. Why am I nervous right now?
No, I have nothing against Arby's food. Actually, frankly, like when I'm in a pinch, like in remote areas, like in Western North Carolina, I'll eat Arby's. But
I do not like Arby's, so I'm on board with all this.
Hey, if I'm in a pinch, I'm with you. Because I justify in my mind, I'm like, I'm getting all that beef. It's good for the protein macros, even though it's the most disgusting beef possible.
Yeah, it's not too bad. No, I've run into a number of chains over my life that were rude and condescending, and then there's a big culminating event where they basically called the police because they thought my $100 bill was counterfeit, and so out of spite, I'm going to put them out of business.
I feel like we're sitting in an episode of Billions.
I'm Lucas Pinkerton, and I endorse this message.
I feel like we're literally in an episode of Billions because a lot of the things that main character did in Billions is like, oh, wait, hold on. You're telling me that teacher did you? It's just like, I'm going to buy the school.
Yeah.
And he would literally do deals so he could buy the school and then change stuff out. And this is what Joel's doing. I love
that
it.
one's more. I'm more facetious about that one. I'm not actually going to, spend my time and energy to troll people or businesses. But
I think it's funny that's like on the. We all have those things, whether people want to admit it or not. We all, right?
Yeah.
Maybe not you as a pastor.
Oh, me as a pastor. There are a few churches that I would put in the heretical category, where I'm completely like.
Ooh, do we want to open that door right now?
If we can get them to never be able to post anything publicly again, that would save the souls of so many people who would be led astray.
100%.
Yep.
100%. But
and Arby's.
And Arby's.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just imagine instead of every Arby's that there was another Popeye's chicken. That would be wonderful. Or another Chicken Express.
What about Taco
Or
Bell?
a Chick-fil-A open on Sundays.
Oh, come on, girl. Now you're talking my language.
My kids joke about that. Like, hey, Dad, on Sunday, it's like their whole little like kid joke. You know, we have dad jokes. They have kid jokes. Like, hey, Dad, I'm really excited for us to go to Chick-fil-A, and then maybe afterwards we'll go by Hobby Lobby so we can work. It's like the two Christian-based companies that are closed on Sunday.
That's awesome.
Wow. Okay. Luke. Yes. Lucas.
Yeah. Either way.
I called you
That's
Luke
fine.
one time and it felt weird.
Yeah, that's all right.
Any initial real quick questions for Joel before we expand on a few other things? Like,
So you said it's called a black badge.
Yeah, the DEF CON thing. Yes. It's just like a mark of honor that allows free admission to the event, which is like the pinnacle cybersecurity event. It's not like a work conference like it's not like a CES or a SHOT Show or something like that.
Sure.
It's more like a giant party for all the hackers in the world, and it's changed over time. But
So like because with the Hollywood Walk of Fame and like stuff like that, right? It's very subjective when people get let in, right? Like recently, like George Lucas and Carrie Fisher and some of these people who should have been on the Walk of Fame, like from the public perspective, should have had it like years ago. So there's no real criteria. It's like a group that kind of vote on it. With the black badge, is there like criteria that you have to meet, or is it one of those things?
It's like a gold medal in the Olympics for hacking.
That's
you have to win
so
the competition. The competitions are actually becoming spectator sports, which is kind of crazy because most people think of like the movie Swordfish or like The Matrix when they're hacking. The Matrix is the only movie where there's a legitimate looking hack on an actual Hollywood film.
Yeah.
That I'm aware of, anyways. But it's usually like not very eventful. It's hundreds of engineers in a room working and slaving away at some vulnerability research that they're doing before they find some exploit they can chain together. But when you do it in this concerted environment, you are planting intentional vulnerabilities in the software server, the computer. Like think of a whole bunch of computers in a big network that are running, and they are running things like a web service, right, where you can get a website or whatever, talk to their shippings or whatever. It's all faked, but some kind of network infrastructure, the cloud. And you are intentionally making them vulnerable to exploitation. And so your job as a team is to both defend the ones you're in charge of running, and you have to expose them to the internet. You can't just shield them and take them offline or you lose points, and compromise other teams at the same time. And it's this very dynamic running thing where there's big swings and points, and like they put like, videos and they make it like a spectator thing. It's come a long way since I was a participant in those things, but it's kind of cool.
what this is in Vegas, obviously. And what time of the year?
I don't remember off the top of my head now. I'm in Vegas so much for conferences. It used to be.
I could only
I feel like it's June, July. It's like in the summer.
I'm just
It's
wondering
hot.
when to avoid Vegas so all my stuff doesn't get hacked.
Yeah, well, so good point. So like this is where some of the most important
Yeah.
things have ever come out in security have been released to the public, like walking through door thresholds that can compromise older iPhones. Every ATM in those casinos is compromised, so don't swipe your card. Like those kinds of things are very valid during that. And by the way, security is not just about computers and cyber security. I think also cyber is like the most overused stupid term that has come in the IT space in the last 20 years. But it's also physical security, right? Like the way it's about risk mitigation and assessing risk, which is not that different than how you would do things like threat profiles when you're mission planning, like when you're on the teams.
Yep.
You assess the various elements of what it is that is making up a target that you have, and you score them, and there's systems for that, and it's pretty fascinating. The same way you could score the vulnerability of like. Just imagine that a government system could be remotely compromised and taken control of entirely, or like the SEC's Twitter account that just happened, right? That would get a score because it's remotely accessible and has impact, and like there's all these criteria for it. But you could do the same thing and score a lock in this room, right? Like a physical lock that has ways of being compromised and things like that. So it's a pretty useful skill that applies way far beyond cyber security and in that world into business and life and how you manage kids and medical decisions and everything. So it's been a pretty useful skill.
So I've got one more question before we move on to the next stuff. Did you ever do any like pen testing?
That's what, so like the pen testing piece is, I was never in a position of like a consultant for pen testing, but like our job was to find vulnerabilities, like involvement in projects that have, I will say with quote unquote, had to do with like Natanz military base, the Iranian nuclear facility, those kinds of things. So pen testing, sure, but not on a commercial basis. We were doing this under CERDEC and other contracts for the DoD.
So there's some guys that I've heard of that do pen testing where they actually have to physically like break into a facility and try to do that. Were you like on those teams, or did everything you did was remote? And pen testing, for those who don't know, is penetration testing for the same kind of stuff that you're talking
exactly.
about.
Yeah, penetration testing doesn't stop just on computers or remotely. And sure, like I've been involved in projects that involve social engineering and like dumpster diving and like physical things. Drones, which we'll talk about a lot, I'm sure, in the course of this call, change everything because they can circumvent physical perimeters and fly into with a little wireless access point that now your phones connect to inside of a secured facility. Otherwise, like there's pretty crazy things that are out there. That's all related to penetrating and within networks and infrastructure.
I love everything you said, but I hate all of it.
I just was like, I'm literally sitting here thinking like, oh, there's so many things I need to figure out with my house because we just bought a new house and there's all this old systems there from the other guy. And I'm like, why have I not ripped out all that stuff?
I'm your Huckleberry when you need a recommendation.
Yes, 100%. I didn't even think about that.
Oh my gosh.
Okay. I'm not gonna lie. I am actually like kind of at a loss for words right now in regards to where we go, because there's so many ways I think we can go. But if I was to pause, I think I would like to know what triggered this in you as a kid. Like, how do you get exposed to these types of things? How did you even know this is your thing? Because one of our guests, Ryan Vong, and we did 2 episodes with him, and he was talking about how he one day was talking to his son. His son literally taught himself how to hack and created these systems, and he could just read like hacking code and stuff like that. And he's like, wait, that makes sense to you? And he's like, yeah, blah, blah, blah. He's like, oh, they didn't have this. And I'm just curious.
Yeah, I think there's a couple factors. One, it was a way for me to exert control in a world that I didn't often have control, with a pretty authoritative and amazing father, 2 older brothers that could whip me around whenever they wanted to, at least when I was smaller than them.
I was going to say, man,
they joke about it. Like, I'm a large man now, which audio, you can't see that. But
on YouTube.
Yeah,
let's go. If you're not on YouTube,
out.
you should be checking out the glorious beard and just the massive physique. Let's go.
It was probably
looks like Leonidas
to compensate for like being beat up by older brothers my whole life. So there was
worked.
that element of wanting to have control. I've always been fascinated by like mental problems of pattern matching. Like I like to see between the lines and see very disparate things. I think that's where like every modern, having studied this like in hindsight and as an adult and through my career, any major innovation that's ever occurred for mankind has been from the combination of things that are very different, right? Like a good example is Napoleon. Like him or not, for his military leadership, it was genius. He was made fun of because he took light cannons, which were generally worthless, pushed them up hills because they were light enough to get there. That allowed those light cannons to sink ships and harbors. Like, he's genius in how he combined things. Or Netflix, right? Like, this was the combination. I don't know if this story is actually true or not, but it sounds good, so I'll repeat it. The founder of Netflix was driving home from the gym, had to drop off videos at Video Library, Blockbuster, whatever it was back then. And had a late fee and was annoyed by it. And he just dealt with signing up or changing something at the gym with subscription and thought those 2 things should be combined. And that's like strategic kind of intuition or innovation. So anyway, I've always loved those kinds of things, seeing things that are disparate and combining them, because it generally comes out with better outcomes.
Yeah.
And then the third thing, I think it was a matter of, it probably ties back to control. Like, my father hated that I loved computers so much. Anytime he'd see me on a computer, he'd be like, get outside, go play with sticks, go ride your dirt bike, go play with your friends, those kinds of things. And so there was a little bit of like rebellion involved as well that drew me to that.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be my hypothesis as to why I went down that path and liked it so much.
That's pretty cool. Well, I'm looking forward to my son Aiden listening to this, because he does he's really good at like looking at stuff, and I'll be like, boom, that's what it is. And I'm like, how
it's intuition. Yeah, it's like the brain has some amazing ability to do that. And computers don't yet.
It's amazing how God has created us.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing how God has created us. And Aiden, there's this one game we have at our house. I actually want I'm gonna have you play it with us tonight, because Aiden, like, it's to the point where we're like, no, we don't want to play it with you, Aiden, because he's so good at it, and it basically has letters all scrambled up, and it's like these different phrases, like different words that if you say them together, it gets close to the actual word, which allows you to understand the phrase.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Incoherent. Incoherent. It's a game.
Uh-huh.
It's not even close. Like, we play, like, it's not like it says like, hey, if you get 20 cards, you win. We're like, Aiden, if you get 80 cards, you win. And he'll have like 80, and I might have 4, and Amanda has 6, and the girls have the same. You know, I'm just like, and so we joke as a family. And actually, as I'm saying this out loud, like, we actually need to keep playing this with him, even though we know he's going to crush us, because he's so good at it.
Yeah.
So, okay, so that you just like looking at stuff, and obviously, I mean, by what I was saying at the beginning, you like to solve problems.
Well, in the interest of, I don't just like arbitrary problems, I like breaking boundaries and rules. And that often is a problem to be solved for me anyways. Like, I don't like studying for tests, I like invalidating tests, right? Like, I don't like, working. Well, I do love working hard these days. That's something I've learned.
I was going to say,
very acquired skill, but I didn't used to. Like they say, laziness is the impetus and the catalyst for just about every great change in human history as well.
Yeah, if you want to get something done, give it to a lazy person. They'll find the most efficient and effective way to get it done.
That I agree
Some
with,
truth.
but like I used to think that would mean like I'm set for life, but it did take hard work and that's self-degrading, by the way. I'm very lazy. Discipline is a very important and learned skill. It was for me anyways. It did not come naturally.
It is a learned skill set. Thank you for saying that. Yes. So okay. That's incredible. Okay. What did you wrestling, right?
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't like a big thing, but you wrestled. What life lessons have you taken from wrestling? I've never met one wrestler that doesn't have a life lesson that they took from wrestling. That's why I think it's one of the greatest sports for your kids to be in.
I don't know that in jiu-jitsu, like I've been dying to get my daughters in jiu-jitsu.
Let's go.
And there's an awesome, I think I asked you about this, the dojo that's down the street from us. But what I learned in there, I don't know if it's going to be like earth-shattering or something that's not been said before, but I think that effort matters a lot, and talent tends to get outshined pretty quickly outside of like early stages. For kids, you can see where talent matters a huge amount, and so does like just physiology and things like that. But very quickly, that is a sport in which technical skills matter more than size and things like that for the purpose of the sport, right? Yeah. That doesn't mean that like a tiny Brazilian jiu-jitsuist is going to defeat whatever the guy is that plays the mountain and game.
Yeah, that ain't going to happen.
But maybe someone like your size probably could. Well, we'll see. Who knows?
Yeah.
But with that man that size. But the point is like it encouraged and taught me that skill matters a ton. Despite how good you are at something naturally, you've really got to work for it. That was where I got like the roots of discipline. Like, to be honest, had I have like attempted and gone to Buds when I was 17 years old, I think I would have quit. I didn't have the discipline to push things through. Like I didn't at that time. Probably wasn't until I had kids that I now feel like if I had that mentality when I was that age, I would be such a different person today. But hindsight's 20/20.
Yeah, I've talked about this before on this podcast and other interviews I've done. I wish I had the maturity and mindset that I have now when I was 23 in the SEAL teams. Yeah. And I wish I had what I had at 23 when I was 19 in the SEAL teams, acting a fool. But luckily, I had really good leadership that kind of protected me. They protected me, guided me, molded me, and gave me a lot of grace. Yeah. A lot of grace.
I have a question for you related to this, for both of you, really. On, how, like, if you look back and you think of how naive or whatever I was back several years back, every couple of years when I look back, it seems like that's the case. Does that ever end? Like, do you think, like, no. I wonder what Jocko feels of himself 5 years ago versus today, for example.
I know how he feels. And he says he literally, almost every time we talk about these types of things, he says, I would kill to have the knowledge I have now 5 years ago. Yeah. And, it's just I think it's a constant, well, not everybody, but I think it happens for the people that are aware and doing self-evaluations and growing. Because I do know people that I went to high school with that are still literally doing the same thing. Yeah. And there's no growth, and they're just kind of stuck in the routine. And when I say doing the same thing, I mean in regards to how they think. Hey, if you're still doing the same job, awesome. You know what I mean? Like, that's great. You're a dedicated employee. You provide value. You're providing for your family. You're happy. That's awesome. That's not, I don't want anybody to take that the wrong way, but I mean, in regards to their mindset, there is like no real growth from a lot of these people. And I think for people like you and myself and Lucas and the team that I have at Echelon Front and the guys I do business with for Little Calico and On the Path and the Jesus and Jiu-Jitsu crew, there is this constant pursuit of perfection. And if you're pursuing perfection, you'll achieve excellence. Yeah. And excellence is a skill set through discipline. And you achieve excellence through ownership. And if you've seen through your leadership journey and what we do at Echelon Front, when we're doing honest self-evaluations, that gives us a path for correction and growth, and you're a living testament to that.
Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, that resonates a lot. You were talking about something there too that goes back to your question on like learnings from wrestling. You're talking about people that stay in the same place. Wrestling is a sport, and any kind of grappling, any kind of contact sport, where you cannot just keep trying the same thing over and over. Like, you physically can't. You'll gas out and then you lose. And so it teaches you real fast to, like, things like OODA loop, right? Like, observe, decide, act, and change. And that's a super valuable skill as well. But a lot of people might learn that in sports, but they don't always apply it to their life. And that's kind of an interesting topic to me.
Yeah, I think more people need to be aware and taught about the OODA loop and how to make decisions and how to do self-evaluations. You know, there's a, man, I'm gonna butcher how you pronounce it, but Apogee School, like APOG.
Tim Kennedy's.
Yeah, Tim Kennedy's. He has one now in Keller. Amanda and I are actually going to go meet with the people that run it and interview with them and kind of see what they have. We might put our daughters in it next year because, like, they're about. Sorry. Yeah, we might put our daughters in that because they're about developing humans. You do jiu-jitsu, you do all these like things as part of the school, and they're like, no, you're not going to be here for long extended periods of time. You're going to be here for the time that you need to be here to learn these things. And part of their program, I believe, is like part of it as you're going through school, as you get older, is like you have to create a business plan.
Yeah.
So it's like a little business school for kids, which is incredible, and it's teaching you life skills and medical and first aid and how to balance your checkbook and doing your taxes and understanding finance and loans and interest rates and all these things that, unless the parents are teaching their kids, like, when do they learn these things?
Yeah. Those new models, they're teaching vocational things, which is useful. There's like a system behind at least what Apogee Creek was originally. I don't know if they've modified to their own anymore. And we started a school, my wife and I, and some partners of ours, called the Anderson Vanguard Academy, to do just that. It was a similar thing. We haven't articulated a class. We've only done like summer camps, those kinds of things. But like I believe in that so much. They also teach concepts that are super important in life, like risk. One of my favorite examples that they talk about, and as part of that curriculum at schools like that, is the Revolutionary War in the U.S. and writing the Declaration of Independence. And what happens is the kids in the class is allowed to set their own charter and rules and how they can socially engage with each other, like their recess time and like their study, how they're going to organize and sequence their days. It's not a fixed, rigid curriculum. But eventually, to teach them about the kind of what happened with the U.S. in our history versus Britain, is they'll start imposing restrictions, and the kids get a little caught off guard, and it gets stronger and stronger until there's no recess. And the whole point is they won't say why or talk about it as like a formal lesson until the kids say, like, we've had enough, and we're revolting, and like, we want recess back. And when they do, the teachers say, okay, great, they got to that point. But and again, they don't prep you or lead the witness. The kids have got to do this. But then they'll say, okay, so you want to write your rules? Well, here's how it's going to work. You write your rules. What do you want? We're the authority. We're your opposers. And now you're going to roll a die. And if that dice does not land at a certain number, you lose, and you have no recess for a week before you get to try again. Like, they're teaching them both like assertiveness as well as risk acceptance and like risk versus reward. And I think it's fascinating. I wish that I would have gone through something like that as a kid. And I certainly wish my kids do.
No joke.
I would. Good Lord. Do they have that for adults? No, just kidding. That's incredible.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Wow. Okay. So let's talk about your school. Or I guess you wouldn't call it a school. No,
not yet, but I want it to be one, yeah.
Okay. What's the thought process on that?
Well, I think that the way that the educational system today approaches it is they treat every student the same. I spent a number of years building a company in technologies. I was an executive for them called Newton. It was about adaptive education. So an example would be if your kid's learning geometry and they're trying to learn something like a concept of calculate the area of a triangle or the length of an angle of the side of the triangle. Your child might not know the concept of right angles, right, which might be necessary to understand that there's 180 degrees or whatever the problem is. And education systems today will teach gigantic bland modules and assume that you grok and you understand all those concepts before they move to the next one. They build upon each other in a linear manner, but they have a huge gap in that if you miss something or don't have that context, you will fail to put together the combination of additional learnings and context, these ontologies. And there's you can actually map out a knowledge graph of how to get to areas of a triangle or certain comments like in trigonometry or math or English, grammar, whatever you name it. So the software that we built would understand what you know as a student based on what you've answered on questions, what content you've been presented for. And so when you go to learn, instead of saying your teacher says, turn to page 76, chapter 7, module 1.2, it's giving you content that is specifically based on what you don't understand as necessary to grok and understand the concept that you're trying to learn. So I want a school that emphasizes technology like that, like adaptive education, that puts more impetus or control in the hands of the kids of this class and really just prepares the world's future leaders. And there's not enough of them. I live in a state of New Jersey that has an amazing school system from a perspective of standardized tests, but I think it's irrelevant and it shows. Yeah. Look at undergrad school now. Undergrad, I'm not discrediting school at all. And my wife's a PhD. I dropped out of college. So I'll just put that out there right up front. We have very different occupational backgrounds. She's a doctor in psychology and saves kids basically that have gone through sexual trauma histories, and it's an incredible thing she does. But I disagree with the approach of the public school system, and New Jersey is a great one. I just think that so much better could be done for the entire body of students, but especially the kids that struggle the most on the bottom and the kids that struggle but they're on the top from intellectual capacity as well.
Yeah.
And the cost is huge.
So that is part of the reason why our daughters are homeschooling. And now we've had this hybrid program that they're in. They go to school on Mondays and Wednesdays. It's faith-based. And they have the curriculum. And it's, one of the things is there's a few things they've kind of fallen behind on just because of exactly what you're talking about. And my wife is incredible at changing how she works with them on stuff. It's hey, Corey, you do it this way. Noel, you do it this way. And man, I mean, as a father who wants the absolute best for my kids and their education, because Aiden's the same way. I've talked to you about this. Aiden is very unique on how he learns, and he's got the superpower, and he has some accommodations at school that allow him just to do things different for exactly what you're talking about. And unfortunately, I don't think there's enough kids and there's not enough parents that understand, hey, your kid does need some accommodations because the cookie cutter system isn't obviously going to work, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's literally nothing wrong with that, but they put it in this box of oh, you have these accommodations over here.
EIPs and all that stuff.
Yeah, you're
yep.
Yeah, of course, because, Aiden, you can give him a math problem and he'll go like this. He'll be because he's looking up because that's where he's seeing it and thinking, and he'll be okay, boom. And then he'll write down the answer. But if he can't show you how he got that answer, he was failing.
That's always driven me insane. But yeah, I think your point on the teacher. Work. Yeah. Why do I need to show? Anyways, that's just one that I get personally heated over.
Hey,
maybe because I was cheating with symbolic manipulating calculators and couldn't show the work, but who cares? I got the answer. But the thing you were talking about of good teachers that can chart that path for a student to get to where they need to get to. That's what a good teacher does, right? And in a homeschool environment, you can ensure that happens. And there are great teachers in public school systems. Don't get me. There's incredible people.
Absolutely, yes. Please, if you're hearing this, know that we love those good teachers.
What I would say is that they don't scale,
no,
right? And they don't have the systems or the infrastructure to, because you can't look at the cap. If you have 30 kids in a class, that's just too much to give individualized attention, and so they fall back to it to survive.
Yeah,
and we can't economically necessarily without major legislative change. And a congressional appropriations change the funding that goes to schools to make more teachers. So you got to have systems. You have to have step change systems like artificial intelligence and things like that. But frankly, it's the same thing when it comes to what we're building with ZeroMark. A person, no matter how good you are, can't reliably shoot down a drone, and you need systems like AI to enhance your accuracy.
You saying that I'm not going to lie, in my stomach, I'm like, you just called me out.
Let's go do it. I'm not saying you can't hit a drone hovering in the sky at a couple hundred yards away, but if that drone is the size of the part of the drone you got to hit is the size of the Jocko Gokan, and it's moving 100 miles an hour in a non-predictable path with total maneuverability, good luck.
Yeah, I zero chance. I'm not even hitting that with a shotgun.
They study with shotguns.
Not an AR.
The best shooters in the world, like Olympians and like Jerry Mikulik level shooters, Ben Stroger, they hit 80% of the time with a shotgun if it's within 100 yards on these drones in these environments. This was a study done by the Federal Prison Bureau. However, they hit with 1 or 2 pellets, so less than 10% of the payload, and does nothing to the drone. So it's like anyways.
Yeah, no,
I jumped the gun.
Well, that's why I love what you're doing, because there are guys like me who are well out of the game, who are well out of the prime in regards to my shooting capabilities. Even though I put myself above most of the general populace right now, but compared to where I used to be with my skill set, and I still am foolish enough to think that I could do something like that. And you're like, yeah, actually, statistically, you can't. You're not going to be able to. However, you add in your technology, and it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And so before we transfer down this path, I know Lucas might have another question, but I also want to make a statement. This schooling idea that you have, the technology, everything you just talked about, not only is going to make our general school systems better, and enable the teachers, correct, to provide value and be able to do their job at a much higher level. But think of all the people that homeschool because they don't want their kids being taught the things that are being taught right now in general schools. And that's a big thing for us, was like, no. Like, you're not going to like force these things and these
Absolutely.
Ideologies, that go against our beliefs and values. But there are some, again, my wife's amazing at being able to homeschool and teach and do all the things that she does. She's phenomenal. But there's a lot of people that are homeschooling that don't have what my wife has. They're not able to teach their kids at a high level. And there's a lot of, I know factually people that have said, I would love to homeschool my kids, but I can't.
Yeah.
I can't do it. I don't know how to do it. So they keep their kids in the regular schools, or if they're blessed enough to financially put them in a private school, that's the next best option. So that's also going to be something that could help people that want to take control over the education of their children and say, no, we're actually gonna do it on our terms for what's best for our kids and our values, because that's what this nation was founded upon.
Totally.
And and you're just giving people more freedom again, which is incredible. What do you got?
So when we're talking about, like, in particular, you mentioned, would you change something from 5 years from now? That, or, if yourself 5 years ago, I've debated this a lot, right? And so I want to kind of bounce off of you this question. Like, if you had the knowledge that you did, one of the things you guys talk a lot about, and you in particular, is that, like, knowledge is not power, the application of knowledge is power, right? Scripturally, when we see knowledge being talked about, like, wisdom is knowledge applied. I think if I would have had all the same knowledge that I have now 5 years ago, I wouldn't have been smart enough or wise enough to be able to implement it. It would have just been extra stuff that was in my mind. Sure. How much of, like, from your experience, how much have you grown from the mistakes that you've made in the last 5 years versus if you would have just imparted that knowledge into yourself? Because I think for me, I've got to learn hard lessons. Right. And if I don't learn a hard lesson, then it probably doesn't stick. Yeah. So how many of those things you've learned in the last 5 years are because of hard lessons, and that's the reason why you got to the point that you're at? Yeah,
I don't want to, I'm not trying to indirectly answer that question or take it a different direction. Sure. I think it's not about the hard lessons. Like, if I magically had the knowledge, I still probably would make mistakes because there's certain things like that are crystallized and you just need experience. But the thing that comes to mind strongest for me as it relates to that question is the things that I've learned in leadership that are like, them, and but there is no real hard lesson. It's just something in hindsight that then suddenly magnifies, or you could see plain as day. Yeah. So, like, the amount of things you can accomplish. Like, I think it's Andy Frisella says all the time, like, people underestimate what they can do or overestimate what they can do in 6 months and grossly underestimate what they can do in 5 years. Yeah. That's true. That applies to leadership in a big way too. Like, you can have done something over 5 years and been very proud of that, but once you reach that level of success and, like, accolades with whatever project or business you're working on, you think of what it would have been like if you had all the lessons you had learned, like, for example, in leadership, developing people more and leveraging them, like thinking about these, like, long tail investments that actually you're building more assets, right, as opposed to pushing for speed and progress. Like, that balance is not a hard lesson learned, but it's a nuanced and subtle one that you rarely get the chance to go back and do it again in a direct manner. But you can always try to apply those things in your next, project, effort, endeavor, whatever it is. There's just no real way to like compare. That's why I struggle with like the hard lesson piece. And don't get me wrong, I've had big failures in hard lessons, but I don't think that they were due to like lack of intelligence. I think that they or lessons being learned. I think they were more personal character flaws than anything else, like overambition or ignoring, letting like emotions get in the realm of risk mitigation and those kinds of things.
One of my one of my best friends is learning the system for the stock market, and because there's a lot of people that's what they do for a living and they do very well. And the biggest thing is understanding how to make logical, non-emotional decisions and sticking to the systems in place and all those things. And our emotions, as you remember from the FTX and what we've just talked about in life, is detachment is a superpower.
Yeah.
And when we can detach from our emotions and those things, it helps us make better decisions.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I think there's a place for emotions too.
Oh,
Don't
for
get me
sure.
wrong. Like you got to have conviction and faith to do certain things. Faith in yourself, faith in spiritually as well. And I remember we had a lot of conversations on the detachment piece, 'cause that was pretty profound for me when we were doing those FTX exercises. Just how visceral it became. And to me, it was like, there's like the literal sense of detach in those exercises from like your tunnel vision, looking down sights. And the thing that I had taken away and shared with the group during those FTXs was if you've got to make space to detach, sure, but then you've got to be deliberate about how you use that detachment and what you do with it. Mm-hmm. You don't just magically like look back and see the whole world and the patterns that are necessary. And that's easier said than done.
Yeah, absolutely. So where are we at with, you wrote down some stuff, anything you want to open up or elaborate on?
No, I covered what like the things that struck out as interesting over the course of those questions. The question you had, Lucas, on like the hard lessons, it's really spinning in my head. I can't get it. Like it's. I wish I had a better answer to it because it's an important one that would be very insightful.
Well, so understand that hard lessons to you, so lessons that you've done may not seem as hard because I think you do a really good job at looking at things from a very strategic standpoint. But some of the so just take the word hard out of it. And what are some like life lessons that if you were to sit down or if you were to write a book for your kids as a manual, like what are some things that stick out?
Oh yeah, do what you love. I've been in the corporate space. I got to pull up a text message that my own mother just sent me. It's a video though, so I can't do that. But it's it was just that like there's a quote. I can't attribute it. I can't remember what it is, but it's more or less people spend their lives living like they're never going to die and then wind up dying like they never lived. And you spend so much time and energy making money, preparing to retire, and it's not always feasible to retire at 30 or 40 or something like these influencers make it out to be. But it is important to stop and make sure you enjoy what you're doing. And anyone can. I don't care what anyone says. It's not like economic hardship is real, and like work is like there are bills and obligations, but you can still find things that are enjoyable, whether that's in your work or not. And if you don't, you're living like you're never going to die, and you're going to die like you never lived.
Yeah. Wow. That's powerful. That's a good reminder for all of us. And I know the listener base that we have is very broad in regards to where they're at in life and financially and just spiritually and emotionally and physically. And what you're talking about is, it's one of those things that we, discussed earlier is about like what success is. And like if you don't love what you do, like you're missing out on the purpose of life. Mm-hmm. And, one of our pastors, we had this event called Prepare. It's a 3-day fast our church did, and there's things every day at the church and online as well. And the guy was saying, I'm done living my dream, and I'm gonna live with intent to fulfill his dream for me. Mm-hmm. I was like, ooh, that was good. That was really, really good. Because think of how much more fulfillment we would have in our lives if we lived our lives to honor God and the dreams that he has for us, the life he created for us. you can't tell me if you're living and walking with the Lord to fulfill those things that he's put on your heart and those skill sets, that you're not going to have fulfillment. I mean, look, like, you're a great example of this as a pastor. You know, like you're walking out the current path that the Lord has put in front of you. And I know there's a lot of hardships that come with that, and there's a lot of stress, and there's a burden that you carry, but you also love what you do.
Yeah.
And you have fulfillment from that. And it's like, you know, when I was in the military, I mean, yeah, I loved what I did. And I remember, you know, until it came time for me to transition out and shift what I was doing with my life, there's not a dollar amount you could have put in front of me that would have taken me from the SEAL teams. People are like, oh, well, you don't. I'm like, no, I'm telling you, you know, because there was and it was just like one of those things where it was like I loved what I did, and I also knew that I was living out the intentions that God had for me at my life in that time.
Yeah. You know, on that topic of you know, God's calling and intentions and hard lessons, a couple other things popped in my mind when you were talking there on the impact that kids have had on my life and all the hard lessons they have taught me, which I never would have experienced. Like, a very different source of inspiration. I believe that not only did God put kids in my life at this stage of my life, and we're blessed, and so we're so happy that we have the kids we have, but I also had 2 daughters first. I think that was pretty critical for me personally, to balance things. Like, my 5-year-old, Juliana, she's the first person, not even like, regardless of her age or the fact that she is a little girl, that is fearless of me. Like, she has no fear whatsoever. I have any of the things that have worked for me in like social circumstances or business when it comes to influence have zero impact on her. She'll come downstairs, but like I'll literally be assembling a fire control and like with a machine gun in the workshop, and I say, you've got to go upstairs. Maybe I say it in a little more with like tone or attitude. And if I do, she'll say, you know, no, I don't like the way you spoke to me with that tone. I will not go upstairs until you say it nicely. And I'm like, wow, I could be mad like somebody and discipline her, or I could use it as an opportunity to realize like I probably did have a tone that was totally uncalled for her. And I had 2 things that she has taught me, and my second daughter, and why I'm so glad I had 2 daughters that are totally unafraid of me, is one is I had no idea what I am like from like a tone perspective and attitude perspective, or how other people would perceive it, because it doesn't match the intention. That was a big wake up call for me. And the second thing is I never knew how selfish I was until I had kids. And like, that's something that's a really difficult thing to assimilate and kind of process. You know, I think that I'm giving, always thought I was giving and like generous, but like kids really open your eyes to what, like when you're selfish or not. And I feel pretty blessed to have, you know, be on that path of changing.
Dude, that's awesome. That is awesome. And how old is your son?
He is just turns 1 in a week or so.
That's right.
That's
right.
My little meatball.
Oh, that's awesome. That is incredible, man. All right, so ZeroMark. Let's talk. I know we've skated around it. We've you know, kind of put our toes in the water when it comes to what you're doing. I mean, whatever version of it you want to give, that you want to share for our listeners, and then hopefully, you know, our listeners are very broad, and I think there's a lot of life lessons just from what you're doing at ZeroMark, and I'm intrigued to learn more about it as well.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of spots I could begin, so feel free to jump in and ask questions and help clarify it. But we talked a little bit about the origin story. That was like Jesse, we were a little additional context on that is we were the operation or the FTX mission that I think was about prioritizing executing and not splitting teams. And when the group of employees that I had brought to the event decided to split, the radio call was murder them, right? Like in the simulated training. And what clicked in my mind was, well, how could I be efficient? This is going to be actually a lot of work. I don't want to do that. And Jesse was talking about me missing shots or something, you know, poking fun at me. And
because you were acting as a role player.
Yes, I was. Yes, I was not with the team. I was with the
opposition team.
Yes, with the Op4. And I'm just sitting there, kind of like, these are little laser guns, and I'm just watching it, like sitting on the edge of this little castle wall, and I'm pivoting it back and forth, and I'm like, what? Like, we have systems like this for air defense and like turrets. Like, why isn't there one for a small Caribbean? And like, as a matter of fact, my Tesla had just gotten the full self-driving beta, and it drove itself most of the way to the range, and I'm like, the car can do this. Why? Like, there's more technology in that car than there is in a U.S. Abrams tank, which is crazy. Why isn't there something like this in defense context, which is so important and meaningful to me and the things that I'd wanted to be involved in and have an impact on? And that's where the idea came. And so I asked a bunch of those qualifying questions to Jesse, and then the conversation kind of grew a little deeper, and that was enough of a validation for me to explore that further. To hear you didn't call the idea stupid or crazy. He said, yeah, I would use it if it was light enough, like if that's possible. And so I set out to go see if it was possible. But anyways, what we're trying to solve for today is removing the skill of marksmanship from any kind of dismounted operation. And that starts with carbines, sure. What I mean by that is the skills that it takes to be a good marksman. You could train all you want in a static, in a shooting range. Put yourself in a dynamic situation or a two-way range where in like a military context, or especially in a military context, you've been on patrol for 48 hours with 2 hours of sleep, or you just witnessed a close friend of yours get shot. Like they're gone. Like these things change the way that your brain functions. Your adrenaline is pumping. Your heart's beating 200 beats a minute. Nobody is a good shot then. Nobody. Not even tier 1 operators at that point. Now they'll continue on and they'll do the best they can. And like most people degrade so much in performance that makes the difference.
And we can learn to detach and throttle back and bring ourselves back down to a baseline that's close to where it should be, but it's still, to your point, is not going to be back to the ideal.
Right. Yeah, what you would do under the ideal circumstances. And I felt that it would be possible to have technology integrated into individual weapon systems like the carbines M4s, like M16 equivalents, really any kind of rifle, pistol kind of application, shoulder fired, you name it, that element of skill was a non-factor. And you could automate it out and still not build like an autonomous lethal weapon system, which is a scary thing today. Still keep humans in the loop for it. This is not we're not like precogs from Minority Report or something like that. We're building systems that can determine. They do a lot more than just make sure that you never miss your shots. But that is like the base thing. Like our marketing is ready, aim, fire, and the aim is crossed out. You don't.
Dude.
You will be a good shot under even really dynamic circumstances. Is it USPA? I always forget. No, that's the post office. The shooting competition. I always mix up this acronym, but we're basically running around targets and barricades and things like that for time and accuracy.
USPC?
No, whatever it is.
Yeah,
it's when I first started to test for this, I would just test my time and accuracy. How many it was all alpha shots and what was the time, and it just made it so easy with little carbine. So it was. I knew there's something there that could be done and improved. And the marksmanship from like a capabilities perspective to be able to actually aim and engage drones and deny them a flight, small drones that are changing war as we know it. And domestically, there's a ton of, I'll come back to that.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make soldiers super soldiers. Like for our first investor was David Ulovich and Catherine Boyle. Catherine Boyle was the lead out of Andreessen Horowitz. They're like one of the biggest, most prestigious funds that's out there for venture capital in the tech world, and they're trying to back this new movement called American Dynamism, and they're doing a great job at it. Defense tech was a taboo topic in my world and industry for many years, but then old Putin decided to invade Ukraine, and now suddenly defense tech is a sexy topic again for investors and for engineers. But that aside, I showed them this, and he was like, whoa, you're going to make it so our Marines and our boots on the ground never miss? Like, yeah, count us in. And so they give us term sheets. They were our first investor.
Wow. Wow, that's congratulations, man.
Well, thank you. But we're just getting started. It's evolved quite a bit. What we do now is less about, it doesn't take away or discredit the importance of removing that skill, the friction of skill for marksmanship, but we do a lot more than that too. So like the hard part is, okay, so now we guarantee that you never miss, but there's a lot more nuance that goes into it that humans are pretty good at, that systems aren't, and why we can't just have robots fighting wars for us. Mm-hmm. Like a drone, right? Shooting that drone down means now it is, as soon as you exercise and execute on interdiction for that drone, it's your liability. The liability is everything it does afterwards is on you. And so if you shoot a drone down with payload over trenches full of your friendlies, that's on you. If you shoot down a drone that lands on infrastructure like an aircraft or building or power lines, that's on you. And people aren't fast enough or good enough to know that. Another example would be the features that we do is if you're driving, you see a drone flying by at some vector, 15 miles away, there could be an armored convoy that it's actually flying to intercept, and you would never know that. You can't communicate that with today's communication systems. But the asset tracking we have in battlefield management systems in a computer can determine that instantly. And so you point your gun at a drone, it knows it's not a friendly target. It doesn't really matter what it's doing. It can determine the system, like ZeroMark can say it's got payload. Oh, and by the way, it's flying on a course it's going to intercept with this armored convoy, intercept or notify. Those kinds of context we give to operators with this kind of technology, and it's pretty powerful.
I'm going to keep our rating by saying just holy.
Yeah.
We try to keep our podcast very clean, which we've actually done a good job. And all these
So
episodes.
far, knock on wood. Yeah.
If I just would stop my thoughts.
I'm telling you, me too, man, though. This, like, it sounds like it's not only a game changer for, like, the soldier in the field and, like, defense here, but as far as, like, what it has the potential to mean for the American economy. Because, like, what you're doing, if it has defense applications and then we move that and shift it to like what civilian applications for some of this stuff has the potential to be. I mean, I know you mentioned that there's some domestic applications you guys are thinking about. That has a significant impact on the efficiency, not just of the American hunter, but on the American economy in general, if this kind of thing could be taken and used, you know, in the household for lack of a better way to put it, like if you could have it in American homes.
Yeah, I mean, the current iteration of things, we will never sell an auto-aiming firearm to civilians for the purposes of hunting or like that. I mean, we could if it was strictly limited to hunting, but like we're never going to give something that allows a mass shooter to commit a crime, you know, more easily.
That's unstoppable. Yeah, that could be to the point where they're so good it's unstoppable.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And we have invested heavily in both the technology and controls that prevent that from happening, like the case of loss. We're not focused on soldier lethality today. It's all on counter drones, just to be clear on that. But because
that's one of the questions that I've got in this list is because when you look at the applications of it, like anything with AI automatically becomes scary to people.
Yeah.
Right. But this in particular could be terrifying. But being that it's the way that you guys are talking about it, it's much different. Yeah.
Like at a board level, we decided early on, like the question was, okay, there is big opportunities for soldier lethality, and that's important, and I'm sure we'll have an impact on that in the long run, but it'll be done in a way that is ethical and with the right oversight and guidance and tethered to the DoD, not just a Western cowboy, you know, tech startup that's building weapons that could you know, increase murder or however you want to slice it.
Yeah, not Skynet.
Right.
But
like,
that's what we're all thinking, right?
We had to decide, like, should we do the lethality for military? And that's not out of the question, but it's really a below the waterline thing. Like, the big emphasis and need they have right now is this counter drone. But the same technology does matter for households outside of home defense. I've had many arguments with potential buyers and investors that are like, well, why can't I have this for home defense? I'm like, man, you don't need an auto-aiming XM7 to defend your home. There's plenty of options for that. And, like, the odds of whatever.
Right.
That's an ego buy.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I'm sure that same person buys panoramic quad night vision goggles for their home defense as well. So it's
they still haven't put the batteries in.
Yeah, exactly.
You got to prevent corrosion. You know,
well,
you can't give the batteries in. It's not good for them.
But there's a lot of applications domestically for law enforcement. Like I think before we started the podcast today, I was telling you about this, or previously about like. Someone could so easily fly a drone into MetLife Stadium that's rigged with explosives if they know any bit of a chemistry. And like, I can't believe that hasn't happened today. And that's terrible. We have mass shootings that are covered by media, but like there will be a drone attack on a civilian population that the police and local government can do nothing about. Nothing at all.
Yeah, for sure. I've had these same conversations with buddies as well.
They need to. And that's why like we're excited to work with some potential state-backed funds that tie us directly to like those kinds of efforts. But outside of like the threat of terrorism domestically, drugs and smuggling. Do you know that 2,000 drones cross the border illegally in Texas alone every month? Mostly used for smuggling. So this is fentanyl and other drugs.
Good grief.
Because you can carry, like in a tiny drone that costs $50, you can fly 300 pills of fentanyl there. It's a light payload. You're not going to carry much explosive on that drone, but like fentanyl, sure. Prison systems, every single day, federal prisons have drones fly over the barbed wire fences, drop cell phones and drugs into the yard. And by the time the police get out to do anything about it, they've invested in tech to know that the drone's coming, but they can't stop it. They don't have any kinetic interdiction for it. And it's gone. And now people die of overdose or there's other criminal activities being coordinated, and it's terrible. Those are just some small examples, much less cybersecurity, we were talking about that. I mentioned there has been government entities that have been compromised, not because they were hacked from the outside, but because a drone flew like a piece of network equipment, a wireless access point into the facilities that then they compromised devices with.
Yeah.
Like the potentials are just starting to be explored, and it's all being driven. Like the catalyst behind all this, or like the force multipliers, the cost of drones are so cheap. So you can bet, and it's not hard to imagine that people are going to get their hands on them in massive numbers. And more malicious use cases will come out of them we haven't even thought of today.
Yeah. The Lake Dallas Police Department has a training program that I get to be a part of periodically. And they have a drone that they've been okayed to use so that, they can do surveillance of homes or help with situations with county SWAT teams and those kinds of things, right? And one of the big concerns that we have kind of talked around is the methamphetamines trade that's going on here, is that they no longer is there the necessity to use the highway corridors like they used to, or the private airports and things that they used to use, that now like they're using drone networks in order to deliver this stuff, but also to pick it up. So that like they kind of cut out the risk of a middleman being caught, is the the quote unquote the Smurf, who is like the low level meth user who is gonna be tasked with going to buy a box of Sudafed every 4 days, right? So that the person who's actually making the drugs doesn't get pinged for it. That guy just throws it in the backyard, and a drone comes and picks it up and takes it to where it's supposed to be. And because there's so many of them and they're flying at such a low level, it's so hard to keep track of what's what. This could be a game changer for all of those types of things.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we want to move in that. Like, we're excited to explore the domestic opportunities. You had also mentioned, like, the home piece, and I talked a little bit about, like, the home defense part, where that's not a good use case for us. Law enforcement's another area where the same tech that can help you have extreme marksmanship can be put on less lethal, so police can rely on them more readily. Whether that's like the Taser 10 that can now shoot, like 15 yards as opposed to 3, but is single darts, so it's harder to be accurate. You have to have dart placement. Like Tasers aren't all that effective. A lot of people think they are, but they're not.
You ever been hit with one of those?
Yeah.
Yep. I had a buddy who had a Taser. He was a state trooper in Oklahoma, and I just wanted to feel like what it was like to get tased with it. And I was like, he's like, I can't shoot you with it because then I gotta like register the cartridge. And so he zapped me on the arm, and I was like, ow. So not that bad. He goes to put the cartridge in, and it fires and nails me in the calf. It's the longest 4 seconds of my life. Like, I thought, because I wasn't expecting it, I was like getting up to walk away, and straight through my pajama pants into my calf and left a gnarly scar in there. Those things are not fun.
Yeah, and if they don't, like, the darts don't spread, like, they're very limited. Like, they're great in terms of what they can accomplish. I think Axon has done wonders for reducing, lethal force in policing, but there needs to be more. Launchers, like beanbags, rubber rounds, those are amazing. They're really effective at stopping even like someone that's cranked out on methamphetamine or whatever other drugs. Beanbag will put you down when it's shooting at that speed, and safely. However, there is a lot of civil liability with that, and a lot of municipalities and police departments don't even allow less lethals to be used, because if you hit someone in the head with a beanbag, you can kill them, and you weren't authorized for deadly force in that case, or hit them in the groin, you can sterilize them. Like, there's all sorts of bad things that can happen. So our system applied to those says, hey, let's face it, like there's not. The standards of physical standards between like the Marine Corps and law enforcement is very different, right? So there's a lot of cops that are going to be out of shape to begin with that need that help even more so, and they barely train, if at all.
And because they don't have the budget to train.
Right. Here's your 20 rounds and 1 hour stipend you get per month. It's on you to go train too. Like
that's a good amount for some departments.
Yeah.
I worked with a group of guys years ago, and I asked them, like, before I started off, like, I was teaching a pistol course, and I just asked everybody, like, hey, how often do you shoot, blah blah blah, and everyone's going, and this group of sheriffs were like 50 rounds. I'm like, oh, you guys put out 50 rounds a day? Because I'm thinking law enforcement, that's good.
Yeah.
Like 50 rounds a day is really good. And they're like, no, a year. And they take those 50 rounds out of our paycheck.
Yeah, that's more common. It's sad.
Yeah. So okay.
Yeah, we could help them. But then the home front piece, coming back full circle to it, we don't do this today. And I want to caveat this with, like, we are not pushing for, nor am I a supporter of, like, smart gun technology. Right. However, there are circumstances where I, as a father, would be super excited for what we could do with this tech, like on recreational guns, right? Hunting guns, target shooting guns, not for the purpose of defense or for professional use. A system like this, take away the aiming, but just the computer piece, can outright stop a kid from killing their sibling or their friend when they get access to an unsecured gun if it was on that gun. Or suicides could be stopped because it's really easy in executions, things that shouldn't be happening. Similarly with like long-term, like the potential for crime reduction, or at least data signatures on things if this was mandated technology, working with legislation. But like, long story short, I think that there's opportunities in the short term to help with tragedies and needless deaths that are related to firearms that aren't controversial at all to the Second Amendment. Again, like as a parent, I would put that on every reckless gun I have. If someone threatened my family and broke into my house at night, I'm not going to run into my safe and pull out an MG42 that I've rebuilt from 80 years ago.
Right.
That's a gun that I would put this kind of system on.
That's cool.
So
yeah, because I like how you put that little caveat asterisk at the end of like, hey guys, this is no threat to our Second Amendment.
No.
This is literally to keep your kids safer.
Yep.
And, I mean, hey, you're locking up your guns in safes, and it's no different. You're just making it to where if they were to get into that safe or into your nightstand.
Sure.
Okay, I like it. I dig that. I support that.
And kids watch everything. Like I've got a 15-month-old, and I guess he's 16 months old now, but he's watching everything that we do. And I didn't realize like how much of what I was doing he was watching until like a couple of weeks ago. And we talked about this. Like we butcher a lot of our own meat at the house, and then I take it, I put it in some what are they called, the airtight bags, vacuum sealing and all that stuff, right? So this little dude is taking out, because it's on a low shelf, because nothing that can hurt him. He's taking out the plastic bag, and he's like trying to put the vacuum sealer on the bag because he's seen dad do it. So like on the one hand, it's really cute, but on the other hand, when it comes to like, I've got my firearms in a safe. Well, how long? But I know when I was a kid, I knew the combo to my dad's firearm safe because I stood behind him and watched him do it enough times whenever we went hunting or whenever we went out to the range, and like he would try to cover it up, and I'm like, nah, I'm gonna figure out how to get in there because in case something happens, right? I want to take care of whatever that excuse is that we come up with, right? So having something like this is just an extra safeguard.
This is one more layer of assurance for sure.
Yeah, dude, that's amazing.
Yeah, and I think there's, look, they definitely overstate statistics on child death and gun suicides are high, but like children, there's about 2,000 a year that are killed from unsecured firearms in the U.S. And that's sad. That shouldn't happen. There should be zero. Yeah. 20,000 kids are injured with firearms, but it's like I don't know. Like these are hard topics because they're very evocative. But if you actually are, detach and think about it objectively, like same with like school shootings, they're terrible. There needs to be things that are done against it. But like the it's not a how do I describe it? A pandemic or some kind of like real epidemic that's happening from a statistical basis in terms of dangers and risks. And the reason I'm bringing that up is not my own personal beliefs. It's because that makes it really difficult to get legislative action or government action to do anything about it, or commercial, action. It's not moving the needle enough. Like I could tell police chiefs, like, hey, I promise you that we could guarantee hypothetically that you will have 80% less use of deadly force over the next 10 years if you had a system like this. And like it doesn't move the needle enough for them to matter. And so they won't invest in it for that purpose. And that's sad.
Dang.
It's the reality of like businesses that are meant to do good and commercial interests. It's just how,
Yeah. And then when you look at it from a funding standpoint, because they have limited funding and
Yep. No, I understand. But that's why we've targeted too, like counter UAS and dealing with drones is a massive market and a huge demand. It's the biggest problem the Pentagon in their eyes right now, right there. It's maybe even exceeded the lack of artillery shells, 155 millimeters, that we can't produce them fast enough. We can't produce counter drone technology fast enough.
Yeah.
And, when the world's making 6 million drones a year and growing fast for these tiny drones, it's a problem that's going to spiral out of control.
Yeah, and the technology for that seems like it has gone so rapidly because, JP, you've talked about like the drones, and you and Mike were kind of joking about this on a previous episode. I don't know if it was on air beforehand. Like the drones that you guys had, you had to like self-launch. You had to kind of like throw them into the air to get them to go.
It was a UAV school that I went to, and I think it was the same one that they're using. It's literally like a styrofoam plane that they put together, and it has like the little box there and the camera, and there's only a view from the camera from the nose that went down, and then one on only on one side. And that's what it was. And you literally had to you take it like this. So if you're watching on YouTube, you can see what's going on. You have a straight arm, and you would literally run as fast as you can, and then it was
Javelin it, yeah.
Javelin, and then hopefully, and then somebody else is doing it. As soon as you go out, they're like with the control.
Yeah.
And you're hoping, bro, I can't tell you how many of those things would just straight nosedive because nobody released up.
They didn't have
up
your
top.
form.
Yeah,
you know, like Atlas Shrugged
or
throwing-
forearms. Either of those things.
I'm just saying, I graduated at the top of my U of A school, so whatever. But that was like, and guys would just and they would explode.
Yeah, it just looks like something from Hobby Lobby with a camera strapped to it.
Yep, but it was also designed to explode because that's how it landed. And then when you brought it down, hopefully you could catch it. Most of the time, not. And when it hit the ground, it would explode in a manner that it could be rebuilt together. And it was horrible. Like the technology on it was horrible. And now, like the drones we use at Echelon Front for FTXs to get videos and pictures and do battle maps that we create, and then also for intel packages. It's incredible. And even from the point when I got the first drone that we're using at Echelon Front back in 2017 to the 3 little drones that we have right now that are just awesome.
Yep.
It's crazy.
So what kind of application does this have for like, let's say, at a cop. See, I'm using my vernacular that I'm learning, right? So
combat outpost.
Yeah. So like at a combat outpost where we know that there are drones that are flying around there trying to get recon for enemy forces, right? Is this something that you would be able to mount outside a cop that could protect those soldiers there as those things are being, like even the recon drones?
Yeah, so absolutely. There are solutions for that today, right? Like their EOS and every Prime of the Sun has some vehicle-sized turret that can shoot down drones.
Sure.
And they're great for base defense. Epirus makes a microwave directed energy weapon that can shoot down hundreds of drones over fry them that get close enough to a base for those kinds of things.
Stellar.
Here's the thing. Those are millions of dollars of assets, right? And like these are cheap drones. And so it goes back to like what's happened in the Red Sea where we're shooting $2 million missiles for a $2,000 drone down, 20 times in a weekend. We will eventually run out of money. It's not sustainable.
Yeah.
This is a system that has granted, like it's a layered approach that's necessary. You're not going to defend an aircraft carrier with carbines for drones, period.
Sure.
It's just too valuable of an asset.
Yes.
Maybe you'll use that as a last defense if you're going through like the Panama Canal or something or near shore. But on a base, it's totally valid. You can have turrets. So ZeroMark is less about the gun piece and like the auto aiming. It's about target lock on any platform. So we're looking at like with Naval Surface Warfare Center and Crane, we were exploring integrating the target lock and the software piece for drones that have arms on them to shoot other drones out of the sky.
That's sick.
That's one example. Turrets is another example.
That's so cool.
One of the things we're building on our roadmap, and we've not released this, but I can give a little bit of detail on it, is a very foldable, like would fit in the analogy that I like to give is, camelbacks.
Yes.
That size, fits in your bag, it's light. Take it out in the field, pop it open, leave a carbine in it, or whatever you want. You could have them fit for like M249s, like whatever, it doesn't really matter. With enough ammo there, and then remotely operate or have it in autonomous mode for drone defense or other applications. These are the kinds of systems that we're building. It's about take the skill of the targeting piece out, no matter if it's a gun in your hands or a turret or it's a drone or an aircraft or a boat, you name it, we'll be in all those. And where we want to get to is a world where there is not a threat. We're starting with drones today, but there'll be other threats in that landscape. There's not an engagement or a response to that threat that we didn't know about to give context somehow behind the scenes of what that thing is doing, what's the risk to us. And if we decide with the human judgment that it's something that we want to defeat or deny, that part's automatic. So that's what we're getting to.
Dude.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of what I've got.
I know we're getting ready to close it out. And I legitimately was sitting here processing all that. And I was getting ready to say, well, man, thank you for what you guys are doing. And then you said the same thing because it's refreshing knowing that there are men and women like Joel and his team of men and women that are passionate about keeping our nation safe, keeping our warfighters safe, and providing value. And yes, it's a business, and Joel is going to grow the business, and he's gonna be, an individual that creates impact. But I'm so thankful for those traits that you have and your team has, because your team. Yes, I'm sure you have a handful of people on your team. They're like, I really don't care what we're doing. Just let me do my job. I want to make my money. But I'm willing to bet almost all of them. I would say the majority of them. I'm trending towards almost all of them. They do it because of the passion and they believe in the mission.
Totally. Yeah, we're very mission oriented. Like, we don't want people. I mean, if we get big, I'm sure there will be that case, but I don't want it. I want us to be the pinnacle. Like, this is something that I've taken out of like the FTXs and musters and just Echelon Front and the combat. The 4 laws of combat and leadership principles out of that. You've got to be tied to it. It doesn't matter what role you have. You've got to be tied to it. Like, what am I doing? Like, I love that example of NASA where it's like even the janitor says, "What do you do?" I help put someone on the moon. And I want that in our company. Except in our case, it's like I help bring our guys and gals home safely. I help them win. I help them reach mission success. I help make it so no other country even wants to attempt to engage with us. That's the kind of technology we want to deal with.
Yeah, and that's what you're doing.
You're getting there. One of the biggest fears I think so many people see in drone warfare is that it's going to be some guy that's hundreds of miles away that has no connection to the human beings that are on the front line that's going to be the ones taking their lives, and you are developing technology that takes that guy out of the equation.
Well, Lucas, it's scarier than that. It's that has been the case for some time now. Maybe not at those ranges outside of like sophisticated state actors like the U.S., but the drones now have levels of autonomy that they didn't have even 2 years ago, where they are deciding. The drone is deciding, not a person. And so, like, increasingly, war will be fought with humans versus machines as opposed to machine versus. Like, there's no reality where it's just us fighting robots like it's an episode of BattleBots or something. That's not going to happen.
Right.
And people need a mitigation and defense from it, and everything we've done thus far. Collectively across industry in the defense space has been either high collateral, high expense, or becomes ineffective too quickly because drones are changing so fast. And like we've taken this to kind of back to old school roots where like bullets don't discriminate and like they will destroy a drone no matter what that drone is. You just the bigger drone needs bigger bullets. That's all it comes down to. And bullets are cheap, whereas other missile systems are not. So,
and it's kind of what was the thing that I've always heard, right? And I'm a child of the middle '80s, but like I'm becoming a better student of history the older I get. It's like one of the ways that we won the Cold War was that we developed so many different armaments so fast that we forced the other side to put themselves in a financial situation where they just couldn't keep up, and the Cold War had to end, or they would be in a terrible financial situation. I mean, if enough, it sounds like. What you're saying is that if enough drones came at us, it could essentially cause a financial problem and a supply problem for the United States. And so this kind of technology that you're developing mitigates not just the loss of life, but also literally on the U.S. budget perspective.
It puts the economic leverage back in our control. Absolutely.
Dude, that's amazing.
For certain circumstances, like you can't shoot a Predator class drone out of the sky, right? We're talking about these small drones, but those are a small portion of the value of drones, like the market share of those expensive drones. That's where all the primes are focused, is missiles to shoot those down. But they're like, like we make 10,000 of those a year across the world versus 6 million of the small drones. And while they might have a bigger point impact, like the collective impact, the small drones are where it's going and where it matters. And we're one of the few in that space.
Yeah.
Bro, that's insane.
Talk about forward thinking, though.
Yeah, no joke.
Is, being strategic and forward thinking and not just, well, this is the way we've always done it. You're like, no, actually, Joel and his company has created and is refining technology that's going to be used against stuff that's not even being implemented at a large state yet.
Yeah.
So you're ahead of the curve, which is awesome.
Well, we hope. Like what I'm looking forward to is every day there's videos that come out on Signal and Telegram of someone running from drones, like out in Ukraine, especially in Israel. It's a big deal. They deploy armor without infantry battery coverage. Like there's no infantry covering them, which is crazy. So they're sitting ducks for drones. But anyways, the videos that come out are people running from drones, shooting at them helplessly, and eventually usually getting blown up. No, those are cherry picked. It's like 1 in 30 drones is actually effective. A lot of people think that all the drones, it's actually pretty low numbers, but that's a testament to how cheap and accessible they are. If you can use them 30 times to have one effect, gives you an idea of the volume of them. Where there's 25,000 from Russia used every month alone. But at any rate, the videos that come out are sad and they're scary. They have moral impact. It's like the new Stuka wine from the jets in World War II. Drones sound like something that sound is going to be 20 years from now, like a huge source of PTSD and problems for people that are fighting in these battles right now. And I want the video that hits for the day to be one where, some Russian is flying their drone or some autonomous Lancet drone or something like that at a Ukrainian element, one of our first customers, and they blast out of the sky and they keep on going. And that's what leaks from their helmet cam. We'll be very excited for that day.
Yeah. At 20, you said 25,000 drones. How often? A month.
Used or lost a month. And that's Russia. Ukraine is getting up there. They're like probably closer to 15,000 now.
It's 834 deaths a month due to drone. If it's 1 in every 30. 834 deaths every month just due to the drones.
That's just death. They say that up to 90% of injuries in Ukraine now are from small FPV and micro drones, which I think is high. I can't validate that number, but that's what we've heard with the people that we're working with, and that's astonishing to me. But it's trench warfare, so it kind of makes sense. There's nothing that can get you in a trench except for drones. Artillery doesn't matter much. No one's charging trenches, but drones, they're there, persistent overhead, just waiting. Scary stuff.
Yeah, that is, man. Joel.
Did we already say thank you?
Yeah. Brother, I know we have a tight schedule today, but man, I just want to thank you for coming out and being on the show, sharing your knowledge, your lessons. I hope we can have you back on the show to dive deeper into some of these things if you want. And so thank you very much for being here. Thank you for what your company's doing. Hey, for all of our listeners, we want to thank you guys for listening. I hope you guys have enjoyed the show as much as Lucas and I have. There's so many just lessons there that were apparent. And then when you listen to this podcast again with intent, you're going to find even more. If you want to follow us on social media, I am at JP Dinnell, JPDINNELL, and Lucas is at Lucas Pinkard, at LUCASPINCKARD. Joel, how can we find you? What's the best platform for what you're doing, whether it's personal, professional, for people, our listeners to be able to follow you and just kind of see what you have going on, and maybe facilitate some relationships and partnerships and help your company grow one day?
Yeah, right now the best is Twitter, or X, I should say. ZeroMark Inc. is the @ handle. We have other socials as well, but we'll be pumping out some fun media on the Twitter account. You can see some videos of our product in action and reach us that way as well.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate that. Make sure you guys are following them. Check them out. Make sure you're also following at Echelon Front. If you check out, follow us on social media. We've got the Def Reset going on right now, which is awesome because you're talking about how discipline is, is a skill set, and it's something that we need to be able to learn and implement into our lives. And the Def Reset is a great tool and asset right now that a lot of us have been following. If you want to learn more about what we do at Echelon Front, like the FTXs that Joel was talking about, the muster that Joel was talking about, you can go to echelonfront.com. I hope to see you guys at a future event. If you want to, you can also check out at Jesus and Jiu-Jitsu _USA. As you guys know, that's a ministry that I'm a part of with Isaac, Stephen, and Josh. We have a podcast called the Jesus and Jiu-Jitsu podcast, and we have a live event coming up. Actually, when this is going to be dropping, this episode drops on January 26th, and so when you're listening to this, tomorrow, we will be doing an event at Double Five in Highlands Village. We do the live events. We're trying to do them somewhat regularly throughout the year, about every other couple months. Every other month would be ideal, but we're still working out that op tempo that we're able to actually sustain. But as the team is growing, as we have people that go to pursuits, that Walking in Truth ministry event that I was telling you about, we have a lot of guys in our jiu-jitsu community that want to continue to help with the ministry, like Anthony Kronk, Trey Warren, Ryan Kramer. All those guys have been, Blake Gibson, very consistent with helping us out at events. So we appreciate you guys. You guys got to check out Little Calico. You got to get that beef.
Get that beef.
It's a company I partnered up with. We're a Texas beef company. Stephen Little started the company in 2017. My wife and I, and Tyler and his wife, partnered with Stephen and his wife, Amanda, and we are helping grow Little Calico. You can follow us on Instagram, and our website is littlecattle.co. So it's the name of our company as a website. We deliver to all lower 48 states. And, we can also send boxes of beef to your customers, clients, friends, family members as gifts. We appreciate all the support you guys have given us over the year. We also have a local pickup in Argyle at our warehouse on Wednesdays and Thursdays. Also partner with my best friend, Josh Strasburger, with On the Path Printing. We are a t-shirt apparel printing company located here in the Denton area. It's been fun, man. I'm not going to lie. It was a long process to get things up and running where it was at. It wasn't a number one priority on what we had honestly going on in our lives, personally and professionally, but we're now at the point where we're getting that traction, which is going to be nice. And so it's been a fun process learning all the ins and outs of that equipment and, how we're going to build out and structure that. And as always, want to thank Origin and Jocko Fuel for all the support they've given me over the years, the partnership, the opportunity just to be a part of what they have going on with their healthy, clean energy drinks. That's a part of Jocko Fuel, all their clean supplements. Origin is a manufacturing company, and what Peter Roberts is doing with Origin, him and his wife, is just incredible, bringing manufacturing back to America. 100% American-made Jiu-Jitsu apparel, gis, rash guards, and now 100% American-made jeans, boots, t-shirts, hoodies, wallets, belts, just all the things that Origin USA is doing, and Jocko Fuel is incredible, and I'm honored to be friends with them. I'm honored to be able to partner with them on what they do and how they provide things, and so we appreciate their support. Go check them out, originusa.com or jockofuel.com. And as we close this out, I just want to, again, thank Joel and his company and his team for what they're doing. And I also want to thank all the Americans out there that are like Joel and his team, that see a problem, that think about it and say, hey, you know what? I can help provide a solution, because that's the way this nation was founded. And that's how this nation continues to do great things. So thank you to the hardworking men and women like Joel at ZeroMark and all the other ones out there that we don't even know about. This has been the JP Dinnell Podcast, episode 17.